What's going on, guys? We are back. We've got another Preston Stewart video he just released, and it's we've been covering a lot of good things happening in Ukraine and things that are seem to be falling apart on the side of the Russian Federation. Things like their logistics shortages, their fuel shortage, they're retreating from certain positions on the front line or withdrawing. Crimea is all of a sudden looking like it may become somewhat besieged, if you will, or cut off from mainland Russia. There's a lot of good, positive things happening on the side of the Ukrainians. But at the same time, the tip of the what's called the fortress belt in Donbas is um, Kostiantynivka, and it's looking like Ukraine may lose Kostiantynivka. So that's what this video is about. I believe it says Ukrainian commander warns this city could fall. It's the only city I'm aware of that would have any that is in immediate threat of falling to the Russians. So, hey, before we jump into it, like, share, subscribe, check out Preston's channel. He's the GOAT. We love him on this channel. And also, if you want an ORC SHASHLIK, a barbecued orc t-shirt, we're still running the sale till the end of the month. Link will be in the description. And seriously, thank you to everybody who's picked one up, man. It's a huge support for me and the channel, living out here in Ukraine. So thank you, guys. Let's go. I'm getting good at the intros, dude.
So there's a town in eastern Ukraine at risk of falling to Russian forces in the next few weeks, with a local Ukrainian commander saying, quote, "It is quite possible to lose Kostiantynivka by the end of the summer. The enemy is pressing very hard." Now, what you're seeing played here is new footage released by Russia showing flag planting operations in and around the city of Kostiantynivka. This is a tactic used by both Russia and Ukraine throughout this conflict, where effectively the forwardmost soldier unfurls a flag to show a friendly drone as evidence of their forward advance. Now, this isn't always 100% accurate, and we have seen instances where a flag planting operation is just that. It's 1, 2, maybe 3 soldiers move forward, they show this flag, and they might be killed or captured, or at the very least, you can't take the evidence of one soldier as confirmation of control of that terrain. But in Kostiantynivka, it's not just the Russian footage, but confirmation from the Ukrainian side as well that there's active fighting inside the city, and it's at real risk of falling here in the next few weeks or months. Starting out with a Ukrainian source here, Hromadsk, a Ukrainian publication that I certainly just mispronounced. They say the main battle of the 2026 summer campaign is currently unfolding in Kostiantynivka. The coming weeks could be decisive for one of the key cities in Donetsk. The Russians have spread so far through the city that it may be impossible to drive them out. The Ukrainian armed forces risk losing Kostiantynivka. Now, to give you an idea of the area that we're looking at, we're using Suryak map today. We generally go back and forth on this channel between Suryak, we have up here, and Deep State map. I'll have both sources in the description below. Suryak, in my opinion, lines up more with Russian claims, more accurately tracks the Russian Ministry of Defense claims of progress, whereas Deep State map tends to add more skepticism to those and follows more the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense updates. So today, when looking at a lot of Russian sources about what happened here, Suryak is actually going to be easier to track the day-by-day progress. Now, looking at Kostiantynivka here in the east, this is the Donetsk region, and you'll see a couple key cities that have regularly come up in conversation, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. This is a fortress belt that Russia is going to have to try to push through if they want to take all of Donetsk. That's going to be a bloodbath, already is in a lot of ways. South of Kramatorsk, so if we zoom in here, move south of Kramatorsk, follow this main road down, it eventually, we zoom in here.
Hold on, I want to see this real quick. So I've lived right up here north of here, which is Kupiansk. I've lived here in Sloviansk. I've lived here in Kramatorsk, and we would operate, and all in this eastern portion of the front. But when I was this has been not quite a year, but when I was in Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, it was pretty rough back then, man. So just from talking with my friends that are still out there, commanders that are still located out there, working out in those areas, it's gotten pretty serious in these locations. And I wouldn't say Sloviansk and Kramatorsk are in danger of being lost by any means, but they're definitely what would you call them? There's a specific name for them, but they're military cities now. There's no more civilians there. It's all military. It's all military operating out of there, living there. Before, when I was there was still some civilian life. There was, still kids and women and men and all kinds of civilians still there, but not anymore. They call that as like a bastion city. I don't know. That I don't think that's right.
That's going to be a bloodbath. Already is in a lot of ways. South of Kramatorsk, so if we zoom in here, move south of Kramatorsk, follow this main road down, it eventually ends at Kostiantynivka. This is an area, it's not a surprise that Russia is advancing there. We've seen them starting to push on the north and the south of town for quite a while, and you can see good portions of it starting to become enveloped. So this was not an overnight thing. It has been a months-long battle. We actually have some details today, not just from Ukrainian commanders, but the Russian commander of the southern group of forces as well. Sticking with the Ukrainian publication here, they quote Sergei, the commander of the Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, who said, quote, the enemy under the cover of green spaces, or new foliage, is beginning to infiltrate directly into the city. His groups that have infiltrated the city are already quite numerous, and our infantry is waging urban battles on the flanks of Kostiantynivka itself. A battalion commander named Yuri said Kostiantynivka is semi-encircled. Because of this, logistics are in a very tense state. The evacuation, supply, and introduction of our infantry into Kostiantynivka are very complicated. And no doubt, we've seen this in multiple occasions before where, I think it goes back to Bakhmut, especially, where Russia tried just to charge straight through, and that became very, very deadly. And then eventually they started pushing around the outskirts and kind of cutting off the supply lines and then effectively laying siege to the town. That's largely what we're seeing play out here as well. They quoted 3 commanders that said more than 100 Russian soldiers have already entered Kostiantynivka. They say one of them believes the number is closer to 250, but it is very difficult to count these individual Russian soldiers. And what they're talking about are these infiltration tactics that Russia has been using now for over a year. The best quote from Uno over in the Azov International Battalion, talking about this, talked about how it's an incredibly effective tactic and very hard to stop if you don't care about losses. And I think that sums it up really well. So mechanized assaults have long stopped being a thing. There's too many drones overhead. Anything, even heavily armored, gets spotted and destroyed a long ways away from the front. We started seeing Russia move more towards motorized assaults with buggies, with ATVs, pickup trucks, even motorcycles. Same issue persists. Those are generally spotted at a pretty significant distance. So what Russia moved to was infiltration, where small groups, sometimes as few as 1 or 2 soldiers, are given a point on a map, a little bit of supplies, go. And we talked about this in a recent video where an actual assault soldier gave the process, but effectively there's different checkpoints. You're just given the next checkpoint. You move to that area and you don't necessarily know if there's going to be contact with the enemy, if it's under constant drone fire, if it's an artillery. You're just kind of going forward without really understanding what the mission is. That is very hard to stop, and they're pushing in from multiple directions into Kostiantynivka, and over time, it overwhelms the defenses. It's exactly what we're seeing play out here. But there are some solutions, according to the Ukrainian officers quoted in this article. They said if some units conduct search and rescue operations and other units hold the front line, then everything will be fine. But if you disperse forces and force the same units to do everything at the same time, it will end up with the enemy simply seeping in and accumulating forces. In fact, the same thing happened in Pokrovsk, Avdiivka, and elsewhere. What they're talking about is this model that we saw play out near Dopropilia last summer, where you have some units holding the line, and then you bring in other units, so the line is still held, then you bring in other units to sweep through and clear out Russian forces. We have seen this effectively utilized in a couple different cases, Kupiansk as well. That's what they're talking about. No indication that that's in the works right now, but we've already seen that model play out, so I would not be shocked to see kind of a localized Ukrainian counterattack in some of these areas to try to effectively clean up the front, right? Especially some of these areas like in this pocket here, there's probably not a lot of Russian soldiers in this area, but it's serving as a corridor for them to move through. So some areas like that would not be shocked to see Ukrainian action here. before too long. Now, and then shifting over to kind of the Russian assessment of how this played out, we've got an interview here with Major General Anton Grunis, the commander, before too long.
I want to piggyback on this, and what he said, that Uno said, is super accurate, right? And shout out to Uno. He's the man, right? But when well, look at this place. It's called Stinky. I've never seen that before. Um, when the Russians don't care about their soldiers or human life, it becomes an effective strategy. Meaning, which we know they don't care about human life. Meaning they just say go push in there, and when you get in there, radio us, tell us where you're at, listen, look, and tell us what you see, tell us what you hear. Um, then you see units like Azov. You see units like SSO units. You see specific Gore units, or now it's a DIU Legion units. They will get called in basically to do exactly what Preston's talking about and clean up the front. So in these cities like this, you'll have larger units like the 249th separate mechanized rifle unit, battalion, brigade, and it's just a bunch of Ukrainian infantrymen, and they're doing the Lord's work. They're doing the hardest, in my opinion, some of the hardest work in the military, which is holding these positions. Lack of food, lack of water, lack of sleep, lack of resources, munitions, blah, blah, blah. They hold these positions, and then units that typically are more well supplied, better trained, like these units I mentioned prior, will come in. They will get a situation report. They will get information from local drone teams and figure out, okay, we've got Russians in this house. Mark it on the map. Mark it on that Krapiva or that the TAC maps. We got Russians in this building. We got enemies in this building. Okay, and then they'll send out small teams of, let's say, Azov assaulters, and they will go clean out these locations. And then all of a sudden, you will start to see like blocks or neighborhoods turn blue back in Ukrainians' favor rather than red. Because the only thing, for example, keeping this entire, and this is an example, all of this red could be three Russians all in different houses about a block apart from each other. So they're not creating a seriously substantial threat, but it's still gaining. They're still gaining ground, right? And while these Russians are in their positions, if they're still able to radio in and talk with their command or other elements in the area, they do create a problem. But all it takes is a group of really pretty well trained guys to go in there, snuff them out. We're seeing a lot of prisoners taken this way, and then now we've got control of that area again. But it's tough, man. I mean, even on this map, you can see where it's like jagged, right? It's kind of jagged around the border lines. It looks like Ukrainians in the middle of the city, the center of the city, Russians on the outside. But what these maps don't portray is that I can guarantee in this blue zone, in this Ukrainian held area, there's Russians in some of these houses. And in some of these red areas, there's Ukrainians in some of these positions. It's so mixed and intermingled and confusing that these are just a rough estimate. Like maybe the Ukrainians have the majority. They have a stronger influence of troops in this area. Russian has a stronger influence of troops in these areas, but they're definitely intermingled and mixed into this city here.
Now, and then shifting over to kind of the Russian assessment of how this played out, we've got an interview here with Major General Anton Grunis, the commander of the Russian 4th Motor Rifle Brigade of the South Group of Forces, where he says, and I'm going to pull up a map from November, actually, because I think that'll be more useful here. So back over to Deep State. One of the benefits of Deep State is you can choose the different dates to see how things looked at different periods of time, like this. So he said, quoting the general, everything started with Ivan Poli in November, and that's the area right here in the middle of the screen. He says in November, the brigade liberated it and ran into a river valley, a river to the left, ponds and streams to the right. The front of the attack suddenly narrowed. The maneuver became difficult.
Down here, Yablonivka and Alexandro Kolinov, that's where I had my most recent combat operations down here. So that was less than a year ago, or a little bit less than a year ago. So you can see when he moves forward in the dates here. Let's watch how far behind the enemy lines Yablonivka and Alexandra Kolinov go.
So if you look at this area specifically that they're trying to move through, you can see pretty tough. All of these little streams moving along the road, and then a river here to the west. You can see how, and then open terrain. Like just not a lot of great options for Russian forces to push through there. Pretty congested, all things considered. So he says the decision was made to continue the pressure in the same direction with part of the forces and to secretly transfer the main forces of the brigade a few kilometers westward from the eastern part of the Kleibenbik Reservoir to the western and to occupy strongholds on the West Bank. So what he's saying here is this area, and again, Kostiantynivka to the north, rather than trying to push up through this narrow corridor, they decided to move forces around to the west through Russian-held territory and start to push up to the north and try to secure the northern portion of this reservoir. We see that, when we look back at a map today, that pretty clearly happened, right? Russia now controls all of that terrain.
Look at that, dude. This is where I was. Look how, I mean, when you look at it from this perspective, dude, it's like, wow, they have moved a lot. But in reality, let's take a look. How far is that really? Okay, sorry about that. I got lost in the maps. Let's see the distance between, just to give us a frame of reference, where I was to the outskirts of Konstantinivka. Yeah, 8 kilometers, 9 kilometers. So when we look at it on the video here, this looks like a large amount of territory that's gained, but it's not. And look, you can even see where you see these gridded locations. That's farmland, right? So a lot of this is just open fields. So it's not like they're taking like real significant ground here, but still, it's headway for the Russians.
They say in parallel, they assessed the enemy, the 156th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Turned out to be the weakest link in the defense. And this isn't just Russian forces saying that. There's actually been some Ukrainian support to that, kind of talking about how the 156th was not able to hold the line like they thought. Going back to the Ukrainian publication Hronsky, they said, quote, another reason for the critical situation in the city, the old brigades called the weak flank of the newly formed 156th Mechanized Brigade, which turned out to be unprepared for such battles. We haven't seen a lot of that recently. There's been very few like weak units towards the front. There were some territorial defense units in areas of Zaporizhia a few months ago, but this is the first time in a while we've heard about a weaker Ukrainian unit being placed in a significant area like this and effectively unable to hold, assuming that those reports are correct. Now, turning back to the Russian assessment here, again, this is the map from November. They say the plan worked. The defense was breached in the area of the greenhouse complexes. We'll zoom in a little bit here. They're talking about coming up here through the west and then right through this corridor here. They say they seized the bend of the river, struck at the narrowest point of the city, and immediately entered the high-rise buildings. After this, the brigade spread out in all directions on the left bank part of the city. We cut the city like a pie, says the brigade commander. And according to Alexander Kotz, the result is already visible not only on the map, but the cauldron is tightening. So again, going back to the current look at this map, down here in the south, Russian forces having a bit of an issue, moving through this congested area to the right of the reservoir, to the east, moved around to the south, pushed north, pushed through this area here. Get that off screen. Pushed through this area here into the western portion of the city and started to spread out. Again, you'll see the northern portion on the other side of the river here still actually serving as a bit of a defensive barrier. And looks like Russia is having a bit of a challenge getting forces across that water feature. So we might be expecting more of an attack from the east and from the south.
It's interesting. The whole reason we were deployed to that location was because of this reroute by the Russians that Preston was talking about. They got jammed up on the right side of the river, so they redirect. They come around the left, and the main straight through when they're coming around the left side of the river, you've got Alexander Kolinov and then Yablonivka, and that's why we were there. Now you could argue like that we failed, right? Because obviously they've taken that territory, but again, it's taken them a year. I was in that city a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago. And they're just now getting into Konstantinivka. So that kind of gives you some perspective of how slow they're moving.
Russian media Rybar, a little not quite as optimistic about the direction things are going, says, quote, expecting the garrison to fall immediately in the coming weeks would be
Garrison
premature.
cities.
The most difficult to assault remains the northeastern part of Kostiantynivka. Again, kind of this area up in here where they have not yet moved into. They say, although the armed forces of Ukraine's position in the city deteriorates with each passing day, thanks to the heights to the east, they will still be able to pin down the attacking Russian units in combat for some time. Now, the reason that this one is important, and this is the same as we've seen for a lot of cities throughout Ukraine, a lot of cities and a lot of towns, over time it loses its strategic importance, if it even had strategic importance, maybe operational significance. We'll go back to Pokrovsk, actually, for a quick kind of refresher on what this looks like. So Pokrovsk at one point, right here, the main reason Ukraine needed to hold this area is it was being used to resupply a good portion of Donetsk. That road was taken long before Pokrovsk fell. So Pokrovsk lost its significance when it could no longer serve as a logistical hub to the east, right? So Kostiantynivka is kind of the end of the road here in this case. Nobody's moving through Kostiantynivka east, west, or south, really. The challenge here is that it is pushing further into kind of the key strong points in Donetsk, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk. In fact, I've got a video that just came out. I'll play it right here, showing Russian drone strikes inside of Kramatorsk itself. That's an issue. You're talking about major hubs here. These are areas where different unit sizes, but they're headquartered out of. It's an area that they're able to move logistics into and out of. And as Russia gets closer and closer to that from different directions, it changes the dynamic in that city. There's already a lot of civilians that have left. With the regular drone strikes, I mean, we've seen what happens in some of these areas. It becomes untenable. You can't have anybody outside at any point of the day because they're just being hunted down by FPVs. So if Kostiantynivka were to fall, as they report possibly sometime in the next few weeks or months, it would be significant in that Russia would continue advancing in Donetsk towards Kramatorsk. The other side of this, and getting this from a couple of Ukrainian as well as Russian sources, is, we'll pull the map back up here, is once through Kostiantynivka, it's not as though it's a straight line, easy shot to Kramatorsk. So moving through this area, there's a number of water features and relatively open terrain that Russia would have to move through on their way further north to Kramatorsk. And we've seen how that has played out elsewhere. It's a lot of bodies to move relatively slow pace. But either way, this right now is an active Russian advance. It's an area they're prioritizing, continue to prioritize in the east. Personally, I would say that this is kind of second place or third place to the ongoing strike campaign in the south. If Ukraine is able to effectively shut off the logistics and keep shutting off the logistics like they are right now, this becomes less and less important. But I do think it's worth noting, as the battles continue to play out, that Russia, in areas where they're putting the focus, are advancing forward. And they likely will take Kostiantynivka here before too awful long. All right, then quick fundraiser update. We've been working all year with Car.
Let's watch this fundraiser update, and then I want to go back and talk about that a little bit.
For Ukraine to provide vehicles to a number of frontline units fighting in Ukraine. Now, Car for Ukraine has a saying right on their website, cars give freedom. And I'll take it a step further. These cars save lives. All right, the drone threat is so significant that vehicles are regularly getting hit. And when a unit runs out of vehicles or just runs low on them, they cannot do all of the stuff that they need to. They can't get soldiers to and from the front. They can't rotate guys out of frontline positions. They can't get the people that are forward the food and water and ammunition and batteries and all that they need. And if somebody's wounded, sometimes they can't get them off the front. If somebody has a serious, say, lower body wound, you know how hard it is to move them 10, 15, 20 kilometers under Russian drone threat to an evacuation point to get treated to save their life? Very challenging. And there's a lot of places where it just cannot happen. You add a vehicle to that mix, all of a sudden they're being driven out. You've got new soldiers coming in, new ammunition, new equipment coming in, the wounded coming out as needed because of you all. I mean, just the other day, we delivered the 16th vehicle so far this year, and we're well on our way to even more than that. So massive goal this year, but it's a big goal because we can do it, and it's having a direct impact on the front. So for those interested in learning more about this campaign, I'll have the link in the pinned comment and description below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching. and I'll see you on.
Check out Preston's channel. Also, Car for Ukraine. His that charity he's talking about, super cool. I got to meet some of those guys when Preston was here a couple times back. So something I wanted to mention real quick is, let's pull up the map. Something that I witnessed while I was out here in this area is that I do agree Kostiantynivka probably will fall. I don't believe the goal is to hold on to it, to be honest with you. The goal is just to make every inch the Russians take as costly as possible, make them suffer so many losses and casualties and financial issues, resource issues, logistics issues, every inch that they move forward, which so far we're moving into the 5th year of this war. Ukraine's done a really good job at doing. So my point is, number one, it's not like there's ever going to be a moment where Ukraine will fully, like, let's say, for example, the Russians push into Kostiantynivka. It's not like the movies where the Ukrainians will get a call to withdraw, and then every Ukrainian in Kostiantynivka retreats, comes back over here to Druzhivka, and now there's no more Ukrainians in Kostiantynivka. No, Ukrainians are going to be held up in different positions and make it as costly as possible for these Russians. It's to take every single block of this town. Right. And then if it's like we've seen in the past and they do eventually withdraw from the city, they're going to fight as they're getting pushed back, fight. Then when they get, towards the end of the city, then they'll pull out and get back here. But the point I wanted to make was the entire time and before, while the Ukrainians are fighting here, there are so many defenses being set up back here. There's deep tank vehicle trenches being dug. There's dragon teeth being put out, those big cement pyramids to stop vehicles from driving. There's dragon teeth being laid out kilometers long. There's sea wire. What's it called? Concertina wire. There are drone positions getting dug in. There are heavy weapons positions getting dug in. There's artillery. They've been prepping all of this for when this falls. Guaranteed. The reason I say that is because I've saw it all the way back here in Kramatorsk and back here in Sloviansk. They've got so many defenses set up here with kilometers long, sweet, nice dug trenches as a redundancy plan in case the worst happens and they end up making it through Kostiantynivka. Then they've got to make it through all of these defenses that have been set up. Then they get to Kramatorsk and have to fight through the actual Kramatorsk city. And then they get through there and there's a ton of other defenses in between Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Then they get into Sloviansk and there's, now you're fighting in another city taking tremendous losses. So it's not like, well, if they lose Kostiantynivka, the Russians are going to take half of Ukraine or something, right? No, it would be very much and it probably is, a tactical withdrawal designed to make the Russians miserable and lose as much resources and cause as much issues for the enemy as possible. Anyways, really cool video, man. I didn't expect them to show right up here where I was, so it's cool to kind of be able to share some of that information with you guys. Anyways, that's all I got. Like I said, go support Preston and his channel. Also, please like, share, subscribe here. If you're looking for the ORC SHASHLIK, the barbecue orc t-shirt, the link will be in the description. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next video.